Hi there. My name is Elena Ward. For 18 years, I led the compliance department at a major tech company I once believed was my second home. I'm not the political type. I don't make noise. I just try to do what's right, even when no one's watching. Then one day, the new CEO called me into his office. "We're dissolving your department. Budget cuts." I smiled and nodded, but what he didn't know was, I'd been preparing for that exact moment for 3 years. And if you've ever believed that quiet people don't fight back, or that integrity has no place in a world of power plays, stay with me until the end, because justice may come late, but it always comes. It's funny the things you remember. When Raymond, our new CEO at the time, dropped that bomb, "We're dissolving your department," the words just hung there in the air of his overly large, sterile office. "Budget cuts," he said. Just like that. 18 years of my life, my team's dedication, all of us, dissolved. Like sugar in hot water. I remember the plushness of the visitor's chair, how I could feel the expensive wool of my skirt against my legs. I looked him right in the eye and I managed a small, polite smile. Nodded even. "I understand," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. Someone far calmer than the storm that had just kicked up inside me. He seemed relieved, probably expected a fight, tears, something. He got none of it. Not from me. Walking out of his office was surreal. The hallway seemed longer than usual. The normal office hum, keyboards clicking, distant conversations sounded muffled. I walked back to my own office, the one I'd occupied for over a decade. Sat down in my chair. And then before I did anything else, before I even allowed myself to truly feel the impact, I reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers found the small, familiar shape of the digital voice recorder. I pressed the stop button. The tiny click was almost inaudible, but to me it was a period at the end of a very long, very carefully written sentence. A sentence I'd been composing for 3 years. You see, Raymond didn't know me. Not really. He saw a quiet woman, silver hair always tied back. Someone who focused on rules and regulations. He probably thought head of compliance meant easily compliant. He underestimated the power of quiet. He underestimated the lessons my father taught me. And he definitely didn't know about the meticulous records I'd kept since almost the day he walked into Hollowgate with his shiny shoes and his even shinier, emptier promises. The shock was there, of course. Deep down. How could it not be? 18 years. My team, good people, dedicated people. My work, building that department from the ground up, making Hollowgate a company that, at least on paper, valued ethics. All gone with a flick of his corporate wrist. But layered over that shock was something else. A cold, clear sense of readiness. Frustration, yes, a deep well of it. But also anticipation. He thought he was closing a chapter. He had no idea he was just starting one. My chapter. It all goes back to my father. He was a shipyard welder. A man whose hands were as honest as his heart. He wasn't a man of many words, but what he said, he meant. He loved his work, took pride in it. He believed in the company, believed they'd take care of him, especially as he got closer to his pension. He'd worked there for nearly 30 years. 30 years of sweat, of loyalty. I was just a kid, maybe 10 or 11, when they laid him off. Not just him, a whole group of older guys. It was just before he would have qualified for his full pension. They called it restructuring. Sounded so neat, so clean. But it was brutal. I remember him coming home that day, his face gray, not with soot from the yard, but with something heavier. He didn't say much, just sat at the kitchen table, staring at his calloused hands. My mom tried to comfort him, but it was like a part of him had been chipped away. The money was one thing, of course. We struggled after that. But it was more than the money. It was the betrayal. The feeling of being used up and then discarded when you were no longer convenient. He'd given them his strength, his best years, and they'd repaid him with a pink slip and a hollow handshake. A few weeks later, He took me with him to pick up his last few things from the shipyard. He wasn't supposed to go onto the main floor, but he knew a side gate. He wanted to show me something. We stood there, me small and him seeming smaller than usual, looking at this huge painted sign on the factory wall. It was old, faded, but still legible. "Integrity is power." He pointed to it. His voice was quiet, rough. "Ellie," he said. He always called me Ellie. "Look at that sign. They put it up there for everyone to see, but they don't live by it." He paused, then looked down at me. His eyes filled with a kind of sad wisdom I wouldn't understand for years. Never trust the smile of someone in power just because they're smiling. And always keep a copy of the truth, because sometimes the truth is all the power you've got. That moment, it burned itself into me. That sign, his words. It wasn't about bitterness, not for him, not really. It was about a fundamental unfairness, a crack in the world he believed in. And for me it became a compass. The idea that integrity wasn't just a nice word, but a source of actual strength. That the truth, documented and preserved, could be a shield, maybe even a weapon if you were pushed too far. It shaped my career choice, my meticulous nature, my unwavering belief that doing things right, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching, is the only way to truly build something that lasts. My father's shadow, you could say, but it wasn't a dark shadow. It was a guiding one. So when Raymond Walker became CEO of Hollowgate, bringing with him that air of shake things up, profits above all, a little alarm bell, tuned by my father's experience, started ringing in the back of my mind. It wasn't one big, glaring thing at first. It was small stuff. A disregard for established protocols here. A push to cut corners on due diligence there. Comments in meetings that made my skin prickle. A casual dismissal of ethical concerns raised by my department. "We're not the party police, Elena," he'd say with that practiced, charming smile my father had warned me about. I started documenting things from almost day one of his tenure. Not because I was looking for a fight or planning some grand revenge. Honestly, it was more like an instinct, a reflex ingrained by my father's words. Always keep a copy of the truth. Started simply. After a meeting where something felt off, I'd type up a detailed memo to myself, noting who said what, the decisions made, the concerns I'd voiced. I'd save it to a personal encrypted drive. If a particularly troubling email chain crossed my desk, one that showed a clear intent to bypass regulations or mislead stakeholders, I'd forward a blind copy to a secure private email address I'd set up, just in case. Then came the voice memos. Raymond had a habit of unofficial chats, usually in his office or over a quick coffee, where he'd push boundaries, suggest things that were questionable. "Just spitballing, Elena," he'd say, but there was always an edge of expectation. After those, I'd go back to my office, close the door, and speak into my little recorder, summarizing the conversation, his exact phrases if I could remember them, the date, the time. I was careful. I knew the laws about recording conversations. These were my personal notes, my recollections, dictated immediately after to ensure accuracy. My memory backed by a timestamp. Over 3 years this archive grew. Emails, scanned documents with my handwritten annotations, voice memos, logs of incidents, ignored warnings. Every recorded breath, every questionable decision, every time he chose expediency over ethics. It was a silent, painstaking process. Some nights I'd lie awake, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Was I being paranoid? Was I overreacting? But then I'd remember my father's face, that look of quiet betrayal, and I'd know I was doing what I had to do. Not for revenge, but for protection. Protection for the company's integrity, even if its leader didn't value it. Protection for my team, who often bore the brunt of his cavalier attitude. And yes, protection for myself, because I saw the way he operated. People who questioned him, people who stood in his way, they didn't last long. I wasn't going to be another casualty of a broken promise, Another footnote in someone else's power play. I was building an airtight case, not knowing when or even if I'd ever need to use it. But I would have it. The truth, carefully copied and preserved. As Raymond's behavior became more brazen, I knew my personal archive might not be enough if things ever truly came to a head. Some of his directives, especially those related to data handling and project approvals, left digital footprints within Hologate's own systems, server logs, access records, version histories. Getting those would require IT access, and that was a line I couldn't cross myself without raising immediate red flags. I needed help. There was one person in IT I thought I could trust, Philip. He was a senior systems analyst, quiet, meticulous, someone who'd been with Hologate almost as long as I had. We'd worked together on a few cross-departmental projects over the years, and I'd always been impressed by his professionalism, and I sensed his underlying integrity. He wasn't a gossip, wasn't a political player. He just did his job and did it well. I asked him to lunch somewhere neutral, a little cafe a few blocks from the office. I kept the conversation light at first, catching up, talking about general work frustrations, the kind of safe, non-committal chat most colleagues have. Then over coffee I took a breath. "Philip," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "I need to ask you for a significant favor, and it comes with some risk." His eyes, usually calm, flickered with apprehension. He put his cup down. "Okay, Elena. What is it?" I explained carefully that I had reason to believe certain company protocols were being systematically violated, and that I needed to verify some specific data trails. I didn't mention Raymond by name, not directly, but the implication was clear. I asked if he could, discreetly, pull certain server logs and access records related to specific projects and timeframes. He was silent for a long moment, stirring his coffee, though it was already cold. I could see the internal struggle. "Elena," he finally said, his voice low, "you know what they'd do if they found out I accessed those logs without authorization? For you or for anyone. It's my job on the line. More than my job." He was right. The fear in his eyes was genuine. He had a family, a mortgage. I wouldn't blame him for saying no. "I understand, Philip. Completely," I said softly. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't incredibly important. And I wouldn't ask you if I didn't believe you were someone who cares about doing the right thing." He looked away out the cafe window. I decided to share a little piece of my own story, something I rarely did. "My father," I began. "He worked at a shipyard for nearly 30 years. They let him go right before his pension. He always told me, integrity is power. But he also told me that sometimes, the only way to sleep well at night is knowing you stood up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when you're scared." I paused, letting the words settle. "This isn't just about rules, Philip. It's about the kind of company we work for, the kind of people we want to be." He was quiet for another minute, then he met my gaze. There was still hesitation, but something else too, a flicker of resolve. "If I do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "my name can never, ever be associated with it. You have to guarantee that. Absolute anonymity." "You have my word, Philip," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "No one will ever know it was you. The information will simply appear." He nodded slowly. "Okay, Elena. Tell me what you need." The relief that washed over me was immense, but it was mixed with a heavy sense of responsibility. He was putting his trust in me, his career. As we walked out of the cafe, the city sound seemed sharper, the air cooler. I knew I was crossing a line, asking him to cross one with me. But some lines, I was beginning to understand, are drawn to protect the wrong things. And some lines you have to cross to uphold the ones that truly matter. The data logs Philip provided, delivered to me through a secure, anonymous channel a few days later, were another crucial piece of the puzzle. They corroborated timelines, showed unauthorized access, and painted a clear picture of manipulated project data, all originating from or approved by Raymond's office. The case was becoming undeniable, with Philip's logs adding irrefutable, system-level proof to my own meticulous documentation. I knew the time for quiet preparation was nearing its end. It was time to bring this into the light, but carefully. I couldn't just drop a bombshell on the HR department. That would likely get buried or worse, turned against me. I needed someone with authority, with legal standing, and with, I hoped, a backbone. That person was Janine Hayes, Hologate's head of legal. Janine was a formidable woman. Sharp, incredibly intelligent, and known for her composure. She'd been with Hologate for about 5 years. Brought in after a previous legal counsel had fumbled a major contract dispute. She didn't suffer fools gladly, and her office on the executive floor always felt a bit like an inner sanctum, quiet, serious, a place where important decisions were weighed. I requested a meeting, citing a need to discuss significant compliance risks with potential legal ramifications. That got her attention. We met at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I'd replayed this conversation in my head so many times, wondering how it would go. I walked into her office carrying a slim, encrypted flash drive. She greeted me with a professional nod, motioning for me to sit. No small talk. Janine was all business. "Elena," she said, her eyes assessing me. "Your email was intriguing. What's this about?" I took a deep breath. "Janine, I have compiled evidence of serious and sustained violations of company policy, ethical guidelines, and potentially legal statutes, originating from the highest levels of this company, specifically from Mr. Walker's office." Her expression didn't change, not even a flicker of surprise. She just listened, her hands clasped on her large mahogany desk. That was Janine. Unflappable. "I have documented these instances over the past 3 years," I continued, my voice steady, betraying none of the anxiety churning inside me. "The documentation includes emails, internal memoranda, detailed notes of verbal directives, and corroborated data logs. It points to a pattern of behavior that includes bypassing mandatory approval processes, misrepresenting project statuses to the board, pressuring staff to engage in unethical data manipulation, and potentially misuse of company resources for personal gain." I kept my tone factual, objective. This wasn't about my personal feelings. It was about the integrity of the company. I placed the flash drive on her desk. "Everything is on here, organized and time-stamped. I've also prepared a summary document outlining the key findings." Janine picked up the flash drive, turning it over in her fingers. She looked at me, a long, searching look. I wondered what she was thinking. Was she considering the implications for the company? For her own career? Was she weighing my credibility? "This is a very serious set of allegations, Elena," she said finally, her voice neutral. "I understand that, Janine," I replied. "And I wouldn't bring it to you if I wasn't absolutely certain of the facts. And if I didn't believe the risk to Hologate was substantial and ongoing." She leaned back in her chair, tapping the flash drive against her desk. The only sound in the room for a full minute was that soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. Felt like an eternity. I just sat there, meeting her gaze, waiting. I had laid out my truth. The rest was up to her. Then she stopped tapping. She looked directly at me, and for the first time, I thought I saw a hint of something beyond professional detachment in her eyes. Perhaps respect, perhaps steely resolve. "All right, Elena," she said, her voice firm. "Leave this with me. I will review it thoroughly. And then, I'll take it to the board." Just like that. No judgment of my methods, no immediate dismissal. Just a straightforward commitment to action. As I walked out of her office, I felt a profound sense of relief, but also a new kind of tension. The gears of justice, the big, slow corporate gears, were finally beginning to turn. A silent storm I had nurtured in the shadows was about to gather its force. I had done my part. Now I had to trust the process and trust Janine. The call came a week later. "Janine, asking me to be available for an emergency executive board meeting. She didn't elaborate, but I knew. This was it. The boardroom was an imposing space. A long polished table reflected the cool, overhead lights. 12 faces around it, the board members, most of whom I knew only by sight or reputation. Men and women who held the fate of Hollowgate in their hands. And one empty chair. Raymond's. He was there, of course, but he wasn't sitting with them. He was at a smaller table to the side, with his own legal counsel. He looked different. The usual confident swagger was gone, replaced by a kind of tight, defensive anger. Janine began the meeting. Her presentation was a masterclass in legal precision. She laid out the facts point by point, referencing the evidence I had provided. The emails, the memos, Philip's crucial data logs now verified and presented as forensic IT findings. She never once mentioned my name as the source, only as head of compliance who had initially flagged irregularities that prompted legal's deeper investigation. My anonymity and Philip's was being protected. When Janine finished, the room was silent. Then Raymond was given a chance to speak. Oh, and he spoke. He tried to deflect, to deny. He called the allegations baseless, a misunderstanding of complex business decisions. Then, he turned his attention to me, even though Janine hadn't implicated me directly as the compiler. He must have suspected. He accused me of being a disgruntled employee, bitter about the dissolution of my department. He even had the audacity to suggest that any recordings or detailed notes I might have kept were somehow illegal or unethical, a desperate attempt by a failing manager to save her job. His voice was loud, full of manufactured outrage. I sat there silent. I didn't need to speak. The evidence Janine presented, with its verified timestamps and irrefutable data trails, spoke for itself. His bluster seemed to shrink in the face of her calm, factual delivery. Finally, one of the board members, an older woman named Ms. Albright, known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense attitude, looked directly at me. The whole room turned. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression calm, my hands resting lightly in my lap. "Ms. Ward," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Assuming for a moment that these observations and concerns about Mr. Walker's conduct have been developing over time, as Ms. Hayes's report suggests they might have, why did you wait 3 years? If things were this problematic, why not bring them forward sooner? It was the question I had anticipated, the one that could paint me as complicit or negligent or malicious. I took a slow breath. I looked at Ms. Albright, then let my gaze sweep across the other board members, and finally briefly at Raymond, who was watching me with a venomous glare. "Ms. Albright," I began, my voice quiet but clear, filling the suddenly hushed room. "For 3 years I documented what I saw. I kept records because my father taught me the importance of truth. But I didn't bring it forward immediately for one simple reason." I paused, letting the weight of my next word sink in. I wanted to believe he would change. Pin could have dropped. The simplicity of it, the honesty, it seemed to suck the remaining air out of Raymond's accusations. It wasn't the answer of a bitter employee or a political schemer. It was the answer of someone who had hoped for the best, even while preparing for the worst. Someone who had given a leader every chance to correct his course, and had been consistently disappointed. The truth, delivered quietly, had sliced through all the power plays, all the deflections. In that moment I felt no triumph, only a kind of grim vindication. The silent storm had finally broken. The aftermath of that board meeting was swift. Raymond Walker was placed on administrative leave, and within a few weeks, his resignation was announced. Quietly. No scandal in the press, just a carefully worded corporate statement about differing visions for the company's future. The board, to their credit, acted decisively once the full picture was clear. They offered me my old job back. More than that, actually. They offered to reinstate the entire compliance department, with me at its head, and with an expanded budget and a direct reporting line to the board's audit committee. It was everything I could have asked for, a complete validation. And I said no. I think Janine was surprised. Some of the board members definitely were. But as I sat there, considering their offer, I realized something profound. I didn't want to go back to being Elena Ward, head of compliance at Hollowgate, fighting internal battles, constantly vigilant against the next Raymond Walker who might come along. The fight had changed me. The 3 years of quiet documentation, the risk, the eventual confrontation. It had forged something new in me. I didn't want to just restore what was. I wanted to build something better. So I walked out through my own door. I resigned from Hollowgate, thanked them for their offer, and wished them well. And then I took the biggest leap of my life. I launched my own ethics and compliance consultancy, Ward Ethical Solutions. Just me, a laptop, and a small home office to start. Honestly, those first few months were terrifying. The phone didn't ring much. I had some savings, but they were dwindling. Doubts crept in. Had I been foolish? Had I let pride get in the way of a perfectly good, powerful position? There were days I'd just stare at my screen, wondering if I'd made a colossal mistake. My father's words about integrity being power felt very distant on those days. Power doesn't pay the bills, I'd think. But I kept at it. Networking, writing articles, giving small workshops. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to get a few clients. Small businesses, nonprofits, companies that genuinely wanted to build ethical cultures, not just tick compliance boxes. And then about 6 months after I'd left, the phone rang. It was Janine Hayes. Hollowgate, under new interim leadership and the board's direct oversight, was undertaking a complete overhaul of its governance and ethics framework. They wanted to hire an external consultancy to guide them. They wanted to hire me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The company I had to secretly document to save was now openly asking for my help to rebuild. I took the meeting, and I laid out my terms. They were stringent. Full access, full transparency, and a commitment from the top to real systemic change. They agreed. Hollowgate became my largest client. And the best part? As Ward Ethical Solutions grew, as the work at Hollowgate and other companies expanded, I needed a team. The first people I called were my former colleagues from the dissolved compliance department. Sarah, Tom, Maria, all of them. They hadn't just been my employees. They were professionals I respected deeply. This time, they didn't rejoin me as subordinates. They joined as partners, as co-builders of something new. We weren't just fixing a broken system from the inside anymore. We were helping companies build better ones from the ground up on our own terms. It was a different kind of justice, a quiet, constructive kind. Poetic in its own way. A couple of years later, I was invited to give the keynote speech at a national compliance conference. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, compliance officers, legal professionals, ethics advocates. It felt like a lifetime away from those quiet, anxious years of secret documentation. My speech wasn't about my personal story at Hollowgate. I've always been private about the specifics. Instead, I talked about the evolving role of compliance. About how we're not just the party police, as Raymond used to say with such disdain. How our job is to be conscience keepers, yes, but also strategic partners, helping organizations build resilience and trust from the inside out. How integrity isn't a cost center, but a core asset. After the speech, as people were mingling, a young woman approached me. She looked to be in her late 20s, earnest, a little nervous. "Ms. Ward," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. Your talk, it really resonated." She hesitated for a moment, then continued, her voice a little lower. "I'm fairly new in my role, and recently I've been under a lot of pressure from my manager to look the other way on some reporting irregularities. Nothing huge yet, but it feels wrong. I've been losing sleep over it." She looked down, then back up at me, a spark of determination in her eyes. Listening to you today, you made me realize I'm not just being difficult or naive. You gave me courage. Courage to document things properly, and to think about when and how to speak up. I smiled at her, a genuine warm smile. I saw a flicker of my younger self in her. That same desire to do what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Thank you for sharing that, I said. It takes real strength to hold on to your principles when you're being pressured. I paused, then added, remember, it's not just about keeping records, though that's important. It's about understanding the bigger picture, and it's about knowing when to act and how to act effectively. You're not alone in this. She nodded, a look of relief washing over her face. Thank you, she said again, and then she moved back into the crowd. Watching her go, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. My father's lesson, his quiet resilience, the path I'd taken. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a torch in a way. And if I could help even one person like her find the courage to hold it steady, to light the way for integrity in their own corner of the world, then all those years of silent preparation, all the risks, all the uncertainty, it was all worth it. The quiet fight continues, not just in me, but in people like her. And that's a legacy I can be proud of. Justice doesn't always wear a robe or shout from a podium. Sometimes it wears silence, patience, and an unshakable conviction that whispers louder than any accusation. My fight wasn't born from a desire for revenge against Raymond Walker, or even to reclaim my position at Hollowgate. I came back in my own way, on my own terms, simply to do what was right, even if it meant waiting 3 long years, meticulously gathering the truth, one quiet observation at a time. If you've ever had to stay quiet when you wanted to scream, if you've ever been dismissed or underestimated, or told that doing what's right is inconvenient or naive, I see you. Your quiet strength matters. Your integrity is your power. Share your story in the comments below if this resonated with you. I genuinely read every single one, and I find so much strength in our shared experiences. And if you saw a part of yourself in this journey, if you believe in the power of quiet resilience and eventual justice, please subscribe to TK Revenge Story and stay with us for more stories like this. You can also support the channel with a super thanks if you feel moved to do so. Sometimes giving back, even in small ways, is a part of our own healing too. Thank you for listening.